Hi, I'm Gregg Pollack, and you're watching my third Founders Talk. This is the third, so there's two other Founders Talks. If you haven't watched those yet, you might want to go back and do those too. And basically in these talks, I go through 25 different things that I learned in business, meanwhile telling you the story of Code School. And in this particular screencast, I'm going to be taking you from the beginning of Code School all the way to and through the acquisition. Not to the end. Not the end. We're still doing amazing things here. We're going to be here forever. So don't worry about that. But like I said, two other Founders Talks. Check those out. You can either find them on Code School or you can just Google Gregg Pollack Founders Talk and you'll find them on YouTube, or at least the first one on YouTube. In this particular one, it's a little bit longer than the other two, likely, because I've got 35 things that I've learned in business, and I'm going to go back and forth between those lessons and the story. And there's going to be some tangents, because I've really learned a lot about business and startups, especially since I started running this technical accelerator here in Orlando called Starter Studio. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're watching this video, I hope you get some good value out of it. But the whole story starts when I moved to Orlando, November 2004. I'm going to try to timeline everything. You'll see those timeline boxes as we go along, so you can see that it was like a 10-year journey. This might sound familiar if you saw the other Founders Talks where I was working for mp3.com. I had an idea for a product. They had a great project management tool, so I figured, yeah, I'll build that project management tool and turn it into a business. No need for customer validation. Yeah, people will just like it, right? So I decided to, because I was out of a job at that point, moved to Orlando. I thought I had a job, didn't have a job, thought I would do my own startup thing. So I called up my dad. It wasn't the first time I called him up and said something like this. And I said, hey, I've got this idea for a product. I think it'll do well. Would you mind, supporting me for a few months while I see if I can get it off the ground? And I was pretty lucky that I had parents that were willing to support me like that. Was this bootstrapping? No. Kind of technically not really bootstrapping. Let's go ahead and define sort of what these terms mean and how you would think about financially funding a startup and all of your options. And I want to let you know how I think about them. So bootstrapping is where you start a startup with little to no money. Typically, this is where somebody works on something in their spare time, nights and weekends. And a lot of people think, yeah, I've got this idea for a startup, but I'll never have the time. But when it comes down to it, you can make the time. It's not about finding the time. You can make the time. Even if it's 1 hour a night, even if it's, Sundays every weekend, you can find the time to start working on your startup. You can make the time, and that's bootstrapping, probably keeping your full-time job. Also, the second thing you do if you want to start a startup, and bootstrapping isn't giving you enough time, is you can ask your employer if you can work less or even part-time. A lot of people don't realize this is an option, but most of your employers at one point in time were entrepreneurs themselves. So if you go to them and say, hey, I've got a dream, something I've always wanted to do. I want to create this, I've got this idea, I want to create this startup. Is there any way I could just work some less hours to give me more time to work on my passion? Even if it's like, 3 days a week, whatever you need to, support yourself on a shoestring budget so that you can bootstrap your business. The third thing you can do, which is what I did, was ask friends and family. You probably have someone in your family or friends of family or family friends that, maybe got really lucky, got some money in the bank, and maybe somebody you consider approaching to ask for money to help fund your startup. How do you approach them? Well, kind of like I mentioned a second ago. You mentioned them, I have a dream, I want to support this, I want to build this startup. And when you first go to them, don't try to make it a pitch and a business pitch. A lot of these people that you're going to go to that are friends, close friends, family, want to help you because they want to help you, because they care about you. And if you bring it too much into the business sense, they're going to feel less incentive to do that. So the first time you ask, it could be simply, can you support me? Right? So I'm not talking about loans yet. I'm just saying, I want to do this, it's my dream, can you support me? They may give you free money. They might not expect to get any of that money back. That's how much they want to support you and get happiness giving you that money. For them, it might be altruistic. Better than giving to a charity. They give it to charity every year. Instead, they're going to invest in somebody they care about. The second thing, of course, you can say if they, if it's appealing to them and they bring it up, they might say, well, am I going to get paid back? And then you go, sure. And so now you're talking about a interest-free loan, right? Because they never said anything about interest. You're just, yeah, give me, 10 grand. If the business does well, I'll definitely pay you back in the few years. And then, of course, at the final, if they're very business-oriented and they bring it up and say, can I have some equity in your business and participate in your future success? Then you can start that dialogue. But don't be the one that starts that. Because as soon as, if you come to somebody and just say, I'm going to give you, can you loan me some money and I'm going to pay you back at this interest rate and I'll give you equity, it feels less like a friend asking for help and more like somebody trying to sell them something. And people who have a lot of money are used to people trying to sell them something, and they instantly get that feeling of, it's not as positive. So, friends and family. After friends and family, your next option to get some funding is to maybe ask your spouse. If you have a spouse that has a full-time job, maybe you could go to them and say, I want to follow my dreams, and is there any chance you'd be willing to support me for 3 months? I think that's how much I'll need to start making money, and we'll evaluate together from there if I should keep on doing this. So there's a rational way you can do that with your spouse and also not risk your relationship, as long as you time box it and communicate how things are going effectively. And then fifth, after all these other options are kind of evaluated, you might want to find an investor. If you like the idea of putting together a pitch deck and spending hours upon hours building relationships with investors and following up, and even when I think about it, it doesn't sound right. In order to really go the investor route, unless you've got like one angel investor you happen to know, you really have to be committed to building relationships with lots of investors, putting together effective presentations, giving out those presentations over and over and over again, and accepting that most of the time you're going to fail and maybe once you'll get lucky. So the investor route, as you can hear with the way I'm describing it, it takes a lot of work. It takes a certain personality. Us introverts don't always succeed at that, although there are more sort of these introverted tech co-founders these days. So yeah, and you'll probably need a working prototype as well, and maybe even starting to get a little bit of revenue if you don't want to give up a big chunk of your company. And yeah, there's some drawbacks here, including that if you go the investor route, and this is something that I've had to deal with a lot myself, is realize that an investor is going to want a 10 times return. A smart investor is basically a gambler. They're going to be making, if they're smart, a bunch of these really high risk investments and hoping that one of them, most of them will fail, but they're hoping that one of them will give them a 10 times or more return. You got to keep that in mind. So when you have an investor, the kind of advice they're going to be giving you and wanting you to do is all centered around getting that really high multiple and scaling your business and spending the money you need to scale it quick, so within 5 years they can get back that 10 times multiple. And that advice they give you may not be what's best for your business. It may be more risky. It may risk your entire business by scaling like that. So you have to keep that in mind. You got to be willing to scale quick and take that risk if you're going to go with most investors. Lastly, after you've exhausted all of those things, you might want to consider using some of your own savings after you've exhausted all those other ideas. I say this because typically most Americans aren't great at saving for retirement. And it's really important that you have those retirement funds in place so that you can, retire someday, so you can stop working someday. So, if you do use your own savings, which you can, I'm saying you can, again, like I mentioned earlier, try to time box it, set milestones for yourself so that you've got money set aside. You think you've got enough in the bank to give yourself 3 months runway, and after 3 months, you're going to need to start making revenue, or you're going to reevaluate that it was a good idea in the first place. Number 8, stay away from ideas that require lots of capital. I see this over and over and over again in the startup community where somebody has an idea, maybe it's a social idea, and they're going to need to have at least 100,000 users before they start making any money. And how are they going to have to get those users? Well, they're going to have to spend. Or they've got this, $10 technology thing that goes with hardware, and they got to order a lot of stuff and give away a lot of hardware in order to make it work. And so those ideas, the only way to really make them succeed is to go and try to raise those millions of dollars from investors. They're going to have to do that, and of course, investors, the odds of you getting investment, unless you've got a really good track record, they aren't that good. They just aren't that good. So stay away from ideas that require lots of capital to get going. Also, number 9, don't create a startup that sells to small business. This is another mistake that I see people make. So any business where you're going to other small businesses, when you think, small retail businesses or small startups, and you're trying to sell them a product, they're the worst people to try to sell to, because these are the people that are, hard on the cash. They don't have a lot of money to spend on extra product. And if you're going to try to sell to them, well, you better be making them money pretty darn quick. It's going to be a tough sell. It's a tough audience. You've got to do a lot of hardcore selling. That is, unless, of course, you're making them money for free. A good example of that is something like Groupon or Living Social. When those guys go to small businesses, they don't require any money up front. They simply go to them and say, hey, we can sell a coupon for you. We've got a huge mailing list. And it doesn't require you to give us any money at all. You just have to revenue share. But because of that, they get in the door. It would have been a lot harder if they had to go to small businesses and said, well, to start working with Groupon, you got to put $100 down. They wouldn't have been successful. So, back to the story. Sorry, that was a big tangent, but it had to be done. OnTask, that project management tool, as I mentioned in previous Founders videos, failed because I didn't know how to do sales and marketing. I didn't understand the commitment that was needed. And that comes to the 10th point. As a startup, half your job is sales and marketing. If you're creating a product, half of your business is a marketing and sales firm that advertises, markets, and sells your product. So if you have 2 people working for you, one person's working in building the product, the other person should be working on sales and marketing. Or you could split that responsibility. That's just the way it goes. That's what you have to do. And I did not realize that at all or understand how to do that. It was around that time I found this Agile Development with Rails book. What was great about that is it gave a recipe for doing consulting work, got into networking groups. This became my office. In case you don't recognize this, this is Panera. So I would work out of Panera for about a year and start to do consulting work. I started at 25 bucks an hour. It was patch software. It was around that time I started the Ruby users group, and it started with 4 to 6 people a month for like the first year, just getting together, giving presentations, talking about Ruby. But man, all the most talented people that I ended up hiring here at NV Labs and then Code School, they all came out of this Ruby users group, all the most talented ones. It's really nuts. It was around that time that I learned how to work with a contractor. And really, it's scary the first time you realize, okay, this person's going to quit their job and they're going to be relying on me to pay them an hourly rate and I'm on the hook. It's a little scary, especially with paperwork. Find yourself somebody that can help with that. Maybe go to your CPA. There's also resources like TriNet, I think they help small businesses with all of the HR related stuff when you're too small to have an HR person, right? Yeah, this is scary, but you can pay people to do stuff. And the thing to keep in mind is if you can pay somebody to do something, to delegate something, which means you can work more hours and even like bill more hours as a consultancy, you should be able to legitimize it because you're making more money, which is going to be hopefully a good hourly rate, which is less than the hourly rate you're paying your contractor, and your company altogether is making more money. So try to think of it in those terms. It was around that time, started the Rails NV blog. I won't go over this too much because I did this in previous Founders Talks, but I wanted to give you the whole tapestry here. Yeah, man, I was really into blogging, and my blogs had table of contents in them. They were so big. I really enjoyed it. It was around that time I started going and speaking at conferences on this hot new technology called Ruby on Rails. Really enjoyed explaining things. Realized that was a passion of mine. And I would research put together sometimes a blog post. The blog post would turn into a conference talk. I would go and give the conference talk. I'd come back home. I would film myself giving the conference talk. I'd put that up on the blog. I'd do self-promotion to get the word out there. And we rebranded this to this Rails Envy blog. There's How I Learned to Love Testing presentation. I gave that at the Ruby Users Group, then went and gave it at conferences, and then recorded it here for everybody to see, and it was pretty popular. A lot of people linked to it. It was about May 2007, did those Ruby on Rails versus Java commercials, went to RailsConf, started building the brand. May 2007 was when those videos started playing. I would go and speak at RailsConf and build the brand, and my personal brand, and the Rails Envy brand. It's also October 2007 is when we started the Rails Envy podcast, the first time we started doing a podcast with Ruby News. Again, building the brand, building an audience. This was from one of the previous Founders Talks, but I can't emphasize it enough that you can't just put out work without spending half your time going and promoting it. Even to this day at Code School, every time we put out a new course, we spend the time to think strategically about how we can promote it and get more people watching it. It was around that time, what was that time? We were around October 2007 when I found out about Peepcode. Actually, it might have come out, Peepcode might have been earlier than that, but it was a site by Jeffrey Grossenbach that was the first one to start selling $9 educational tech videos. So he was a great presenter and great screencaster, and Jeffrey would put together these hour-long videos and sell them on Peepcode for $9 a pop. Taking inspiration from that, August 2008 is when I put up envycasts.com, started selling screencasts for $9 a pop, just like Jeffrey, because it seemed to be working out and people understood that the value of paying $9 for an educational video. Which brings me to point number 13. There's nothing wrong with following in other people's footsteps. When people invent new ways to sell things in new markets that are big, there's nothing wrong with entering into that market with them as well. And maybe even taking some learning from what they did, and some people might say you're copying them, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're not being malicious about it. Which brings me to 14. I really do not believe there is such thing as competition. And that's sort of the mentality that I have drilled into myself. Because when you think of two businesses that, might seem competing, like for example, Peepcode and EnvyCast here, you might look at that as competing, but really in reality, if we tried hard to think and we talked together, me and Jeffrey from Peepcode, we could very likely figure out a way to promote and work together to get more people buying both of our screencasts, whether it's cross promotion. The market's small, like there's so many people out there that don't know about our services. Maybe if we work together and figure out some cool way to market together, we can get the word out to more people and we can all win. So next time you sense yourself going, oh, but these people are going to be our competition, resist the urge and instead think, how can we both work together so that we can improve both of our businesses? What can we do? Don't think of them as competition. It was around that time, February 2009, when New Relic approached me. They had sponsored some of our podcasts and said, hey, can we pay you to do a series of screencasts on a topic? I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I did a Scaling Ruby screencast. Maybe what they'll do, instead of charging for the Scaling Rails screencasts on envycast.com, which I was planning to do, they can pay me to cover costs to produce them and release them for free. So we released a ton of these. I think there was maybe like 20-something Scaling Rails videos. They were each, bite size, 8 to 10 minutes long. And, I think for each video they paid me around, anyway, maybe like $800 to $1,500. I forget what it was. But basically it covered my time to put them together. And then they published them and they advertised them with their entire audience. And also it had links back to my website, back to Envy Labs. Back to Rails Envy at the time, which was a consultancy, and that led to more work because everybody would find these videos. Again, building the brand. And I really enjoyed producing these educational videos. I got so much positive response from people. It was around August 2009 where we went and did Envy Labs. So me and Jason Cipher with Rails Envy, we had a differing of opinion. We had, we didn't get along. And so we broke up that partnership, which was really unfortunate. And so I had to go off and create a new company. So I went and created NV Labs. And it was a bunch of contractors at first that, we said, let's all get an office over at CoLab, which was downtown Orlando, co-working space, one of the first co-working spaces. Here's some pictures of what our offices looked like back in August 2009. As we got bigger, started out with, Thomas Meeks, Tyler Hunt, and Nathaniel Bibler all in an office. And that was around the time that I asked myself, what would happen if I tried to take on all the work that came my way? So I really became the project manager, the task organizer. I would be billing all the clients, doing all the administrative work and outreach, building up the consultancy. We would hire people out of the Ruby users group all the time. This is what our office, at one point we had a artist come in and do a big mural on the wall. It looked pretty cool. It was around that time that we started some of our traditions, and I think it's really important as you grow your business that you have recognize there's certain things you guys enjoy doing together that become traditions that you do a lot together. One of them was lunch on Fridays. Every Friday, the entire team would go out for lunch and eat lunch together on the company's dime. And it was really great, really a social experience to force everybody to connect at the end of the week, talk about what we've been working on, and just have a great time. Flash forward to today, we've got too many people to go out anywhere, so we cater lunch here at NV Labs and Code School. We bring in lunch from lots of local caterers, sometimes food trucks, and just cater a big Friday lunch. It's a great time. We also started doing Whiskey Wednesdays pretty early on, where every Wednesday afternoon we would take the time to pour a little bit of whiskey and socialize. We were all pretty hard workers and introverts, so having these moments where we were forced to sit back and be social together were really beneficial. It was July 2010, after putting out the Scaling Rails series, I realized I wanted to do, what's the next big thing? What's the next big educational resource for the community? And Rails 3 was coming out, so I thought, hey, maybe this would be a good opportunity to reach out to the Rails core team, that was, all the Rails main developers, and say, hey, would you be interested in having us put together some official videos? So when you release Rails 3, we make some really good polished videos that explain the new features, and you can put them up on rubyonrails.org in a special section that we'll work with you to create. And also, would it be okay if I did a little bit of sponsorship raising, minimal sponsorship here, just to cover costs? They said, sure, why not? So I raised some sponsorship to cover costs and produce some of these videos. I thought I would play for you what this first video looked like. Ruby on Rails is a web framework which puts you in control of every aspect of development. So if you enjoy writing beautiful code which leverages the best of open source technology, then you might want to give Rails 3 a try. So that led into, down below here, there was a bunch of videos that you could watch and play through, and we would teach about Rails 3, and it was all free. Remember, this is before Code School. Code School doesn't exist yet, but this is just me building the brand, my brand, the NV Labs brand at that point, so people knew that we created good educational content, and it, of course, led to lots of really good consulting projects. The consultancy was building. Which brings me to point number 16. As a startup, a lot of people think about, how do I get in front and attract an audience, right? How do I attract an audience to my product? And another way to think about it is, who has my audience already? Where are they going? And how do I have a presence over there, where the audience is already going? This could mean doing guest blogging on someone else's blog. It could mean figuring out how to give them something that benefits them, which will drive people back to you. For example, those Rails 3 videos. That benefits the Rails community because they're free videos, but it also drives people back to NV Labs because it's, I'm in the videos and I say that it's, from NV Labs. October 2010, that was the first time that we did an Epcot trip, and that again became a tradition that every around October we would take the entire team, pay for them to get into the Food and Wine Festival at Epcot Center, give them gift cards, let them in, and have a great old time. So this is how big our team was. You know, everybody here was working on consulting work, with the exception of me, that I would create educational videos and talk at conferences, because that's what I really enjoyed doing. At this point, I want to talk a little bit about how we doled out equity at NV Labs and the philosophy that we adopted at the time. I just came out of a pretty bad partnership where we both had 50-50 and it just ended poorly. So I knew, creating another company, I wanted to always have 51%. It's really good to have one person in your company that can make the final decision, just so you can move forward, and I wanted to be that person. So the other thing is, I wanted to give people equity that was not going to be diluted. I'd heard about how people, you know, got stock and then they would get diluted out of their stock, and it seemed like a not very fair thing to happen. So at the time I said, you know, what I'll do is I'll give you guys each, you know, a small piece of equity that I will never dilute. I'm always either, you know, going to take it out of the chunk that I own when we give more people equity, or, you know, and just take it out of my stake. I'm never going to take equity from you guys. You know, and the other thing I said is, you know, if we ever get to a point where we do create products and we do sell things, I'm going to give you guys more based on, you know, what contributions you give, you know, to the company. And then from then on, of course, as more people joined the company, we'd basically bring them on. They'd work for us for a year. After a year, we'd give them vesting equity. And those guys, original guys too, had vesting equity, which was really good. I'm really happy you did that. I'm a big believer in that co-founders, even co-founders, should have vesting equity in the company. Because who knows what's going to happen 2-3 years from now. There might be one of those co-founders that moves away and doesn't contribute as much, but they're vesting to the same amount. You can always stop the vesting, right? The other thing that was smart about what we did with vesting is we wrote in that no one can leave the company and still own equity. Basically, it says if you leave the company has the right to buy back the equity at the value of the capital account. And I won't get into there's lots of different ways you can do it, but I think we did it in a pretty smart way. And then, of course, you know, as people joined, you know, we would give them 2%, then 1%, then less, then less, then less as they joined in, because the company was more stable and they were taking on less risk by joining us. That's why the risk goes down and the equity they get goes down. But looking back at it, I wish I would have read this book. This book wasn't around at the time, but if you need to deal with giving out equity for your co-founders, I highly recommend the Slicing Pie book. It lays out a scientific methodology to dole out equity based on risk, based on what talents people bring to the table, and makes it extremely, extremely fair. Looking back, I wish I would have followed more of this sort of philosophy. So check that out if you're dealing with these issues. Also, the other thing that made me pretty confident as I went along in the company is I always worked on my rainy day list. So I had a list that I had stored away, which I had spent time thinking about. What would happen if a big client went away? What would happen, you know, if revenue started dipping? What are the 12 things that I could do to drum up more business, to get more customers in an emergency, right? And without that, I wouldn't have had the confidence to grow the business and hire more people when I got more consulting work. And I liked that when I would bring that up, I'd like to hire somebody for this new project. Sometimes people in the other company would say, hey, you know, more conservative people would say, hey, should you really be doing that? Should we be hiring somebody? Is that safe? And I could point over to the rainy day list and say, look, here's a bunch of things that I can do. And it would sort of gave everybody the confidence to move forward, and me the guts, you know. I also want to mention here TryRuby, a website. I forget what year TryRuby came out, but it was many years before Code School, many years before Codecademy, and really it was the first, one of the first code in the browser tutorials. As you can see, you would type in some code. As you would type in the code, it would change the directions down below and lead you through playing around with the Ruby language. So TryRuby was a great way to start learning Ruby in the browser. I just got done doing Rails 3 videos, which were pretty advanced. They were for existing developers to get up to speed with the new technologies. So I realized the next thing I wanted to do is create some beginner Rails videos. And it was around that time that Eric Allam, one of the developers that I hired, and I started wondering what would it be like if we combined our high quality explanation videos with the coding in the browser that we see on Try Ruby. And that's how we came up with Rails for Zombies. We put it out and we were amazed at how many people came and played it. We had maybe like 20,000 plays in the first month or two. It got tons of publicity. Eventually it ended up, if you go to the official rubyonrails.org webpage and you click on screencast, you'll see Rails for Zombies right there as a good way to get started. We were pretty impressed around how much traffic we got. We were astounded. It was around that time that I got a call from one of my friends at O'Reilly, because I knew some people from O'Reilly because of the conferences. I would go to a bunch of their conferences, and they knew about stuff that I did in the Rails community, and they also ran RailsConf at the time. One of them gave me a call and said, "Hey Greg, I don't get in one conversation about the future of publishing without Rails for Zombies coming up in it. There's got to be a way that we can maybe, pay you, sponsor you to create more courses like this for other languages." And yeah, as I mentioned in the previous Founders Talks, keep an eye for what people try to hire you to do. So you're like, there's something to this. Maybe we should be doing this again ourselves, and this next time charge for it, because so many people seem to like this video and then coding in the browser. So we ended up looking for a domain and thinking of a good name. We initially were going to call it CodePath. And this was actually one of the earliest mocks of Code School. And you'll notice the subtitle there is like CodePath, Code Awesome. Like, yeah, not very creative. But it was interesting. But codepath.com was taken. There's no way we're going to get that domain. So I started looking around at some premium domains. And it turns out that codeschool.com was available. And I talked to a broker and I managed to purchase it for a nice $1,500. Pretty good purchase. So did that, started building it. About a month before we were going to launch Code School, I got a call from O'Reilly. Said, hey Greg, we're having a conference in New York. A bunch of our executives are going to be there. Can we fly you up, put you up at a hotel, and we can talk about Code School and how we can work together? It's like, sure, that sounds cool. So I flew up there, had dinner with them and their executives and their team. They're really, really nice people. I still keep connected with some of them to this day. But then the last day of the conference, we had a meeting, and they brought me up to their nice suite, and we talked about how awesome Code School might be, and they said, hey, we want to invest in you guys. And I was like, well, what would that look like? And they were like, well, maybe it could be something like, we invest $1 million for like 50% of your business. Whoa. I remember just, goosebumps, crazy. What? People, $1 million? Somebody wants to give me $1 million? That's amazing. I was so flattered. I remember just being buzzed like the rest of that weekend and just like, wow, it's just so validating. This is cool. Should we do this? And we went back and thought about it, and we were just like, why would we wait? We need to launch this thing. We know we can launch it ourselves. We need to launch this thing, see what kind of traction we get, and then evaluate if a good partnership, some sort of partnership is worthwhile. So we told them to hold off, but still, that experience was great. But when I look back at it, it was very whiny and diny, which brings me to number 19. When people pay for you for your things, you may be getting wined and dined. Make sure you pay attention to that when people pick up the tab, when they seem to be overly nice. I tend to be too trusting. I really do. And I assume some people, are very genuine, and they can be genuine and authentic people and still do business and still wine you and dine you a little bit, and that's okay. But just be careful and know that people have ulterior motives at times. Keep an eye out for that. Sometimes I feel like I've been a little bit gullible over the years in that respect. It was February 2011. Our team went down to Miami Beach. We took a rented a big van, drove down there. We had a huge vacation rental, and we were going to a conference because that's where we were going to launch Code School for the first time. And so we did. We launched at that conference with this is what it looked like. You can see we've got Rails for Zombies as one of the things on the platform. And the second course we had on there, and really the only course that we launched with, was Rails Best Practices for $45, because that was the audience I had, was the Rails community, a lot of them that were existing developers. So Rails Best Practices. We put it up there and marketed the crap out of it. And we're really lucky that because I had done all of those previous things, all those past 4 or 5 years, building the brand, getting more well-known, having means to advertise through the podcast, through the blog, that we got the word out so much that within 2 months, we had earned all the money back that we had spent on it, and we're profitable. Of course, we invested that back in the company most of the time, but you can say we were, in the black, I think that's what that means. Which brings me to number 20. Most startups wait until after they have a product to start marketing. They really do. And it's tempting to think, how can I market anything if I haven't started building it yet? It seems counterintuitive, but really, you don't need a product to sell. Sorry if I've said that before and you've heard me say that before, but you don't need a product to sell it. You can start doing customer validation from day one. Go to your potential customers and you start talking to them about the problems they have. What problems do you have in your business? Do you have this problem? And hopefully they say that they do have the problem that your product solves, and then you get them on board and you're marketing, right? You can also just put up a splash page that describes what you're building, and you can start doing blog posts about that problem in the industry and hopefully get some traction and get the mailing list and start to get people asking you, hey, when's your product coming out? So even from day one, when you've got the startup idea, 50% of your time should be spent on sales and marketing. Which brings me to point number 22. All startup ideas can start small. Figure out how to start small. I get sometimes people that come to me with startup ideas and they're like, this startup, what's awesome about this startup is that we've got a series of products and things that we solve, and that's why we're competitive. And so how could we launch without building product A and B and C and D and it's awful. Pick one thing, pick one problem that a business has and try to solve that one problem and try to get them to pay for it from day one and figure out the minimal amount of work you can do to start putting out something there that can start getting revenue. You don't need to be feature complete to start charging for it. I mean, you look at products like Basecamp, right? There's a million features that Basecamp could have, but just doesn't because they don't need to. And when they launched, it was even simpler. And Code School, we just launched with one course. Also brings us to 23. As soon as you start building a startup, start a mailing list. Right? In case you're wondering how to start the sales and marketing bit, that's number one, is you put up the splash page with the email form, you email all your friends and family to tell them what you're doing, and you ask them, you don't ask them permission to put them on your mailing list. You add them to your mailing list first, and then you send out an email to your mailing list saying, hey, you're getting this email because I wanted to let you specifically know about the startup that I'm starting, and I've added you to the mailing list here because I thought you might want to keep up to date, but if you don't, please just take a moment to unsubscribe, and I'm really sorry for bugging you. But then they're on your mailing list, and that's how you start. So brings us 24, find revenue quick. As you build your business, if you're going to pivot on anything at all, the odds of you pivoting on your revenue model are really high. That's like the most, pivoted thing out of all the startups, right? So you got to start charging as soon as possible because you might not be charging for the right thing, or you might not be able to charge for that. And the sooner you realize you're not charging for the right stuff, the sooner you can start charging for the right stuff and start making money and start getting profitable, right? And you have to start. You can't give it to them for free at first. Like, don't think that way either. I'm going to have a product, but it only does this one feature. So I want to get people using it, but I want them. But how could I start charging them for it? I'm going to give it to them for free so they can start beta testing it and they can get on board. And I really don't think that's the right way to think of it. Even if they're paying you, $5 a month when normally they're supposed to be paying you $50 a month, it still, from day one, gets them into the mindset that this is something I'm going to have to pay for. When you give someone something for free and they're not used to paying for it, the odds of them paying for it once you do say, okay, give me your credit card information, are low. But if they paid even something small from the get-go, they're going to understand that they have to pay for the service in an ongoing way and will expect to. All right, at this point, I thought I'd do something fun because I'm really proud of the original product video that I created for Code School and how it communicates what we do, and that'll lead into things that I talk about afterwards. Here it is. So let's say you need to learn to ride a bicycle. You might try to learn by reading bicycle books. You might also watch bicycle videos online, but when it comes down to it, reading and watching can only take you so far. Where you really start to learn is in the actual doing. This is true for cycling, for swimming, for soccer, for whatever this guy is doing over here, and most of all, this is true for coding. This is where Code School comes in, by providing a learning experience which combines instruction through screencasts, practice through coding in the browser, and fun through gamification principles. Let's take a moment to have a look around. Our free course, Rails for Zombies, teaches the basics of Ruby on Rails in 5 levels. Each level starts with a 10-minute screencast like you see here, followed by a series of code challenges you have to solve before moving on to the next level. Since you code in the browser, there's no need for configuration. You just jump right in and start doing it. Some courses like Rails Best Practices even have a point system, so every time you get a question correct, you get points added to your total score. To make sure you don't get stuck, this course also has a hint system. But be warned, every time you ask for an additional hint, the points you get for solving the challenge will be reduced. Once you complete a course, you'll unlock 3 things. First, you'll get to watch the final video of the course. Second, you'll receive awards, which may include additional discounts on your next Code School course. And lastly, you'll receive a badge for completing the course, which will display prominently on your public profile for all the world to see. Are you ready to have some fun and challenge your coding skills? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Code School, where we believe in learning by doing. Best of luck. You might have also noticed in that video that we use all sorts of ways to motivate people to get through our content, from the badges that they earn to the points that they earn for each challenge. And you might not be thinking, dude, I don't care about badges and points, but there are a lot of people out there that do. They need to collect all the badges or, get all of the points and not lose any points. Little things like that motivate people. Some people are motivated by discounts. So we told people, you get $5 in Code School cash every time you complete a course. And that would motivate them to buy because they knew they were going to get another discount later. Also, 26 is let's get your audience to promote you. So when we give somebody a badge, we would always give them the opportunity to tweet or post on Facebook that they earned something, that they accomplished something. You'd be amazed at how people love telling people about their accomplishments. So if you give people the opportunity, they'll promote for you by telling people what they were able to accomplish on your platform. It was around that time, September 2011, that, or maybe a few months prior to that, that we realized TryRuby, the site that we were kind of inspired from to create Rails for Zombies, needed a revamp. It needed to be recoded, and Eric Allam, one of our senior developers here, decided to just jump into it and just recode the whole thing. So we did that, and then we re-released it. But when we re-released it, we put it on the Code School platform so that when people wanted to save their progress, which there was no way to do prior, they could create a Code School account and it would sync up. But they didn't have to sign up. They could play the whole thing through for free. And of course, at the end, if they got through it, we would give them a badge, which they had to sign up for a Code School account to collect. And if you Google Ruby, the first result will lead you to this page, and on this page you'll see there's a link down here in the bottom right hand corner that says try Ruby in your browser, which links to try Ruby. And to this day, it's driving us a lot of traffic. Some of that traffic goes on to convert. Around October 11, that was the second time we went to Epcot Center. Here you can gauge the size of our team at that point. Still, most people were working on consulting work, doing a lot of consulting, tiny bit of Code School. And then we started adding more courses. We made money off one course, we did it again, made money off the next course, did it again, till eventually, when we released Rails for Zombies 2, that's when we put out a subscription, which was pretty gutsy at the time. We only had like 4 paid courses, really, that we were charging a subscription for. And when you break it down, that's like maybe 4 hours of content. And we're charging $25 a month for 4 hours of video content. Now, it might take you, 12 hours with challenges to get through it all, but even 12 hours for $25 a month. But we told people that we would keep on creating content, and if you're subscribers now, we'll give you access to courses first before everybody else. And at that point, I had built up enough social capital that people kind of jumped on that. We had means to promote it. I had means to do marketing. Another kind of neat thing that we did that we don't do anymore is back then we allowed people to purchase courses individually instead of a subscription. So they could purchase a course and have access to it forever for like $45, or they could get a subscription to Code School for $25 a month and get access to everything. And I think seeing both of those numbers up on there, $45 or $25, what do you want to pay today? The answer is obvious. Most people would go, okay, well, I want the monthly subscription because I'm going to take this course and I'll be done in a few days. So a lot of people would convert to subscriptions, and rarely at that point would people buy the courses outright. And I think it was using some really interesting psychology there that got people to convert to subscription. Seeing those 2 price points, which makes me think about this book, Predictably Irrational, by Dan Ariely. If you're really fascinated by these sort of pricing tricks and the psychology behind it, the economics behind pricing, be sure to check out Dan Ariely's book. There's all sorts of great stuff in there about how you can, leverage the way people think to get them to pay for your products. Flash forward, May 2012, we got a bunch more courses, some CoffeeScript, CSS cross country, some testing courses, Journey into Mobile, and Node. So things were progressing fine. We put out about a course per month. The other thing that we would do when we put out these new paid courses is we'd let everybody try it before they bought it. And we would actually let people try it without logging in at all. So we'd put out a course. We would spend a lot of time promoting that course to all the audiences we had access to. And we'd say, hey, you want to learn Node? Come and try level 1. Start learning right now. And they were able to arrive straight to that course, watch the first video, go into the code challenges, and get to the end of the code challenges. And of course, at that point, we would say, well, you're going to have a subscription at this point or buy the course outright. But I think that did really well for us, especially because people weren't familiar with the way that we teach at the time. We're still really new. So it got people starting to learning a little bit and going, wow, I just learned a lot there. It's definitely worth $25. Talking about free, you've probably heard of HBO having a free weekend or a free week, Showtime, free week of Showtime, and you can go and watch all of their content. So they sort of have a week where they give it away for free. And that doesn't piss off the subscribers at all. So we were thinking, how do we do that with Code School? Could we do maybe a free weekend where we open up all of the courses and do lots of promotion around it and send out a press release and get some good press that, learn these new languages and code on Code School for free this one weekend? Like, okay, we've got to do that. It was also around this time that we started getting approached by companies like CloudSpokes that said, hey, we've got a product that targets developers. How do we get in front of your audience? So now, instead of me thinking, how do I get in front of our audience elsewhere, people were coming to us, nice enough, and saying, how do we get in front of your developers? And so we thought, well, what if you sponsor that free weekend, and we figure out some way that, like, for every person who signs up to get access to that free weekend, we'll make it clear that we're adding them to your mailing list and our mailing list. So we put up a web page, said CloudSpokes wants to buy you a free weekend on Code School. Just put your email in here and we'll let you know when a weekend comes so you can get access. And we were smart about how, you know, people would submit their emails. Then on the next page you would say, don't let your friends miss out on this free weekend. Click here to tweet or post on Facebook. And it went really viral. We had tons of people tweeting about that because, you know, it's like they feel like they're doing their friends a favor because they're telling them about free access. So CloudSpokes sponsored, but we were wondering, you know, how do we make this sponsorship work out and do it in a way so that they are getting their money's worth? So we asked them, well, how much would you pay per email that we give you? And they said, well, these are really good leads. These are developers, obviously. We'll give you $5 per email. All right? So that up to 10,000 emails. So we did manage to hit 10,000 people showing up, although of those 10,000, only about 5,700 actually showed up to play, but that doesn't matter. They were giving us good email addresses. And then what happened is, during the weekend, when people would go to their My Account page, we would have a little thing there that says, subscribe now and don't lose access. You can keep on learning. Get your first month for $9 on Code School. Convert now. And then we would send them follow-up emails after the weekend was over that would say, click here to view your customized report card on how you did on the weekend. And they would click that, and we would show them a nice little report card about how they did, which was smart because we got them to click through. In the email says, click here for something free we're giving you. Right? It wasn't immediately marketing to them, which was smart. That means people are going to click from the email into their browser. Then in the browser, we would have a little report and we would say, you're doing great. If you want to keep on learning, if you subscribe right now, I'll give you your first month for $9. So, wow, that really worked. So basically, we ended up getting paid $50,000 to acquire 600 new subscribers. Those were the people that subscribed after this weekend. That's like a negative customer acquisition number, right? We were getting paid to acquire customers. Too bad you can't do that every weekend, right? But we ended up doing this every year. We would figure out a way to do the free weekend, and we got more than that. We got a company that would pay us up to 20,000 emails next time. And so we got even more people playing, which converted to even more subscribers. So doing the free thing sometimes can really pay off. Number 28, there are lots of sponsorship opportunities, usually from marketing departments with budgets. That's another thing that I started to become aware of, is that there are tech companies out there that wanted to get in front of our audience. And some of those marketing people are given budgets that they are told to spend before the end of the quarter or they lose them. Therefore, if I can keep in touch with these marketing people and just establish a relationship with them and check in every so often, hey, you're looking for any sponsorship opportunities? Even ask them if they're looking for, last minute ways they can get in front of our audience. And if the timing's right, you can get some really great deals on sponsorships, on marketing money. You can tap into the marketing budget if you just are strategic about it. Oh, okay, here's where things get interesting. When I was getting ready for this presentation, I dug up an old financial deck. So at this point, where we stood in June 2012, we were going good, had the recurring subscriptions. Somebody had me put together a presentation to show to some investor or something. Someone decided that I was a good idea to do it. So I took the time to put together this presentation. I thought it might be interesting to show you. So it's a little bit from a pitch deck, right? Where you see, our price point, the age of the company, and how many users we had in June 2012. So we had some really good registered users, 4,500 subscribed users. I then have got traffic up here, conversions. So unique to registered user was 4%, registered user to paying user 7%, average unique conversion 1.62%. Really interesting. And here you can see at the bottom, our cost per acquisition, $0. Lifetime value means on average, how much does an average user spend with us? And at that point, it was pretty low. It was down around $58. But you see those two things together, cost per acquisition and lifetime value? Like, when I look back at this, like that's, number one, that's kind of inaccurate because we are spending money on free content to drive people to the site. And number two, what that means is if we're getting $58 per lifetime value, that means we can definitely afford to spend at least $20 to acquire a customer. So I really should have tried harder to find somebody who knew AdWords, like Google AdWords, and how to do advertisements places, and because if they could figure out how to spend at least $20, maybe even $30 to acquire a single customer, we should have been spending that money. It would have actually built our business. But again, I was never really good with sales and marketing, so I didn't value that, and I wasn't surrounded by people who knew that. So if we jump into financials, this is kind of interesting. So this is the first couple months of Code School, first 8 months with the monthly revenue. We were able to get subscriptions right away and build more every month. And of course, the only reason, you gotta know, the only reason we're able to do that is because I had spent the prior 4 or 5 years building up the social capital so that we could do that. So there's a lot of people that subscribed that I found out later were like, yeah, Greg has given us enough value, free content, whatever he does, I'm gonna support just because he's already helped me in my career for free. Occasionally you would hear that. So people would subscribe and get value from Code School, and we were up in a pretty good trajectory. We never had a hockey stick. We never did one of those. It was all very consistent. So number 29, learn how to spend money. As I mentioned before, we were not as aggressive as we should have been at first, figuring out how to do sales properly, how to do marketing. And I chalked that up to just not trying hard enough to find a salesperson or a marketing person that really knew what they were doing, or even a firm. We should have at least hired a marketing firm. They should have been able to pay for themselves really, really quick if they just would have been real strategic about ad buys. And retargeting. Oh my God, retargeting. If you don't know what that is, and you've got some sort of recurring revenue business, you've got to figure it out. That's those ads that follow you around the internet. Once we figured out how to do retargeting properly, oh my gosh, it made us a good chunk of money. June 2012, that's also when we released RSpec. And July, that's when we put out Try Git. So after Rails for Zombies and Try Ruby, we started thinking, well, what other try courses should exist around the internet? What other technologies can we try to create the place where beginners start? A completely free resource for the community that people have no reason not to link to. And so we knew some guys at GitHub, because a lot of the guys who started GitHub came from the Ruby and Rails community. So we reached out to them and said, hey, we want to create a Git course here, but we want to make it free. Would you guys mind and be interested in sponsoring that Git course? You guys will sponsor it, we'll put your branding on it, and we'll make it free to everyone. But you're gonna have to pay us to do it. So they agreed, they paid us some money, and as I said here, helped pay with our course development cost. But it was a sponsorship, so we still own everything. It was their sponsorship, it's still on our platform. And in July 2012, we released Try Git. If you haven't tried it, you definitely should. It's basically just text-based, didn't have video, where you just go through and type in different commands. At one point, you kind of sync up the what you're building with your GitHub account, so it kind of sends you to GitHub and back to authorize and create your first GitHub repo. And then at the end of the course, check this out. If you're not signed in, it says, you've earned that cute little badge over there to gaze at his perfectly symmetric whiskers for all eternity. Sign in or create a free account on Code School and let your friends know about it. Also, once we, it wasn't at first, but later on, once we put out Git Real, the second Git course, we would do the upsell right here. If you'd like to learn more, Code School has released another Git course helping you work alone or with a team. Play level 1 for free. So that would click them over to play another course. And you notice here, we could have gone straight for the sign up, right? We could have said, get real at Code School, 25 bucks a month, but no, we simply say more free over here, right? So at that point, we collect their information. We say, sign into your Code School account to go and play this course, and then play level 1 for free. So we get them in our email list. And if you search for Git on the internet and you click on the first result, you go to this page and you'll notice right here, it says learn Git in your browser for free with TryGit, which brings people over to our free resource, which is a pretty big traffic driver. And you'll see this over and over again, that we did this over and over again, create these free community resources with no barriers of entry, no reason for the developers of Git not to link there, because we keep it classy. But that link actually didn't happen until a little later on. And these numbers are numbers from later on as well. They're not current. But just to give you some of the math behind these free courses, that we get them sponsored to cover costs up front, but in the long run, we make our money back and then some. So since August 2012, and these numbers are probably about 6 months old, this many people have tried it. Of the people that we know that went right from there, and like the very next thing they did was convert, 2,000 of them went to convert to subscribers. That's a 1.67 conversion rate, 1.76 conversion rate. And then our lifetime value, which has gone up since then, is up as high as 120. If we multiply those, we get this number. I say it's an old number because, like I said, it's a little out of date. But it goes to show you that some of these free properties that we took the time to invest in, maybe we lost a little bit of money at first with all the time and energy we put into it, but the long tail, we made our money back and then some, and built our brand. There's a lot of brand value in these free properties as well. So next up, July 2012, or really a few months before this launched, Eric Allam came to me. He was a big fan of iOS. Eric, by the way, I consider one of the co-founders of Code School just because he put so much work into it at first. We called him the CTO for a while, though he's not with the company anymore. He left to do other entrepreneurial stuff about a year ago. He loved iOS, and he wanted to figure out how to teach iOS in the browser. Is that possible? Can we do it in sort of the video and then interactive sort of way? And him and Thomas Meeks got together over a weekend or two and figured out how to do that properly, how to make it so you could code and then send it over and compile it all. And we realized it was going to cost some money to do it. We realized it probably cost about 100 grand, really, to put together the first course for it. So instead of getting a sponsor, we said, well, let's see if we can crowdfund this. So I went and I studied all the other Kickstarter videos and what made up a successful Kickstarter video, and I put together ingredients and scripted it all up. And for this one, I did hire a local crew to help me put it all together, local film crew. And we put it up, and we did really good. We managed to raise $152,000. Now, the main reason for that, again, is because we had a mailing list and we had means to promote it already. We had a big enough audience. You can never assume that you put up a Kickstarter and people will just show up and pledge. Kickstarter is not going to give you any traffic unless you get really popular really quick so you can bubble up to the top. And certainly we did that. So we got a good push from our promotions and a good push from Kickstarter. If it wasn't for Kickstarter raising us to the top, we probably would have broken about 100,000, but I bet the other 52,000 was because we were able to get popular pretty quickly. And the first 3 days get a lot of pledges, which raised us to the top of their most popular lists on Kickstarter. Couple more courses, built these out, and we finally figured out how to work with O'Reilly. Oh, I never went back to that story. So eventually, once we launched after a couple months, we told them that we weren't interested in investment at this time because we were profitable, and I didn't really understand how to use money properly. If I would have reflected more back then, if I would have been surrounded by more sales and marketing people that knew how to use money effectively, that might have been different. But I didn't know how to spend money properly with business and how to scale it. And taking investment money is scary. So we never did. So we figured out how to work with O'Reilly. We worked on that Try R course, which is a pretty cool course talking all about data modeling, data manipulation. October 2012, third trip to Epcot. And here's how big our team was at the time. Yeah, pretty big. At this point, we had a team of people working on Code School. Is Ashley in this picture? Yeah, Ashley's in this picture. We hired a project manager to work just on Code School. She also helped with support at first. And we had Dan McGaw, that guy in the middle there. He was our first sales and marketing person. So I did get smart and tried to, hire a sales and marketing guy, but he was like a one-man team trying to do a bazillion things. That was kind of nuts. So we had people working on Code School and doing the consulting work. We were up to about 19 courses. We released Try iOS, Assembling SaaS, Backbone 2. It was also around that time that we released Try jQuery. So a few months prior to this, we thought about, what's another free property that we can create a good starting point? And of course, JavaScript was getting hugely popular. And what was the most popular JavaScript framework? jQuery. It's still the most popular one. So we said, how can we create the best way to learn jQuery on the internet? Well, let's talk to the jQuery core team. So we reached out to the jQuery core team. We said, hey, we'd like to create a free property for this. We'd like to make it free. So to cover our costs, can you guys sponsor us? And they said, well, we're not a business. We're just a core team. But we've got the jQuery Foundation. We can give you guys the equivalents in sponsorship packages. We can give silver level sponsorship for the jQuery Foundation or whatever that's probably wasn't the right level, but something. And we said sure. So we took a risk. We sort of funded this one ourselves, this free property ourselves, built it up, and put it out there. Put a lot of work into it to be the best place to start learning jQuery. And to this day, if you Google for jQuery and you click on the first link and you go to the jQuery homepage, there's 2 different places on the homepage that will bring you to Try jQuery so you can get started. And you can go there and you don't even have to sign up. You can just play through the whole thing for free. And we do it as a utility for the community. You don't have to pay for anything, which I think makes it okay, right? I mean, some people might look at this and go, oh, you guys, you've got people, if they want to save their work, they're going to have to sign in. And when they sign in to create a Code School account, you guys are going to market to them because they're going to be on your mailing list. And, yeah. And when they get to the end, they want to put they're going to have to sign up for an account if they want to save the badges. But, so, yeah, we're running a business. But I like to think that people like the jQuery core team value so much that we create this free resource that is completely free, and it's a complete course, and it's not like you get to the end and we say, well, we just taught you half. In order to buy the other half, you need to go buy the product. No, it's a complete course from start to finish. And at the end of that course, in that outro video that we put there, we even tell people there, here are a bunch of other free resources to keep on learning. And if you like the way we teach at Code School, you can also go check out our courses, and if you want to subscribe, it's $25 a month. But we support jQuery. We do the support on that. People they need support on these free platforms, and it costs money to host them. It costs money to keep them up, maintained, bug-free. It costs money to do support on them. So we've got to be making money somehow. If somebody did this without some sort of revenue model, there's no way they could maintain it for longer than a year or two. They would get sick of it, and if they were doing it in their spare time. So I think it all evens out. I think with karma it evens out, right? So the other thing that we released in March was DevTools. So a couple months prior, we asked ourselves, who else do we want to work with? What other stuff could we do? And we said, wow, let's see if we can figure out who we can talk to at Google, because Google has all these great, they support these, their APIs and the development tools and Google Maps, and people are using the Google Maps API, and there's also Chrome DevTools, which is getting more popular. Let's reach out to Google and see if we can talk to them about maybe getting them to do a sponsored course with us. So we reached out, and they hooked us up with the right people, and we put out the Discover DevTools course, which is pretty awesome. I'm really happy about how that came out. And again, people they helped us drive traffic to that course, and they sponsored it. So they basically covered our costs for producing it. It was also around this time that we worked with the Rails core team to create more free content. I love free content. I just do, so we seem to be always doing a lot of it. We worked with the Rails core team to create free videos for the release of Rails 4, and we did something different here. What we did is we released the Rails 4 videos, all free. If you click through from the official Rails homepage, as you see here, you can get access to all the free videos. But if you want to do the challenges, you've got to subscribe. All right, so it's kind of, we tried something different there. I think it worked out because we want to get people to convert. So that worked out really well. Then we, June 2013, a couple more courses. That too is for Get Real 2, our second Git course. We released Try Objective-C, another try course for Objective-C, the language you need to learn if you want to code iPhone apps. Started doing a bunch of iOS courses. And it was also around this time that we ran into some dark days. Because a few months earlier, we had a big consulting client that bailed. Wait, I don't think it was one. I think it was like 2 or 3 all at the same time. And I think one project ended and one bailed. Maybe 2 projects ended. And, well, what do we do? We had a lot of people going back and forth between working on Code School and Envy Labs. So we took the people who now needed work on Envy and we would move them over to Code School, because obviously Code School is a moneymaker, and that's what you do. You move people over and you start working on building the infrastructure of Code School and building more courses. And that certainly was worth it. But after 2-3 months of that, it was really starting to drain Code School's reserves. And I was focused on Code School. Maybe I wasn't focused enough on getting more consulting work. And so we thought long and hard of it, and we ended up doing some layoffs. We laid off about 4 people. And I had no idea how much layoffs would suck in so many different ways. Layoffs sucked because a lot of people lost a lot of trust in me and the leadership, and it really hurt our culture. And there was a lot of people that, yeah, I think it was just trust. I could just sense. I feel like I have a good intuition to how people are feeling, and I could just sense that a lot of trust was lost. And there was no way I could have predicted just how awful that would be. So I kind of look back at that and go, I wish I would have tried harder months beforehand to try to, plug the hole in the boat before we had to do it. Though also looking back at the same time, some of the people we did let go were some of the weakest links, right? Some of the people that we might have looked back and went, wow, they didn't really jive with our culture. They weren't as talented. They were beginner developers, but they never got to the level that we were hoping they could be. So they might have been bad hires. So even though it hurt the culture, I think it allowed us to get some people off the team that were weaker than some of the other people on the team. Now, I made sure, I have to say this just because I feel like I have to. I followed up with each of these guys that we ended up having to lay off afterwards to make sure they had work. And they all did, and some of them I gave some really good referrals to, and they all ended up with work. So they never ended up in a bad financial situation. We gave them good severance, and they all got really good gigs afterwards. I made sure of it. And I feel really good that they were able to move on from there. One of them even joined Startup Studio, the accelerator, because he's one of the few people I know that is not only a good programmer, but also has some good founder in his blood. So anyway, I'll stop talking about this. But layoffs really suck. I could not have foreseen how badly they were going to suck. It was also around this time where, on a recommendation, somebody asked me to lunch. They were an organizational psychologist by the name of Dr. Laura Gallagher, and just asked me to lunch to talk and tell me more about what they do and listen to what I had to say about, how the business was going. And having that person come in at that right time was at the right time, because I was struggling with a lot. I was struggling with how to get the trust back into the company, how to build company, how to measure that we're rebuilding the trust, how to measure and know from each of the people in the company that we're working on the right things and we're keeping their faith. And these people, these organizational psychologists, I highly recommend that you find one in your community, because at one point, if you're building a business, you will need someone like this. If you end up in a situation where you've got two founders that can't see eye to eye and they're fighting, if you have one person who disrupts a meeting every time you try to do it, if you have one person that always shoots down your ideas, if there's something about the way you work that just feels dysfunctional, that is where you bring in someone like Laura and her company at Key Talent Solutions. You bring them in and they can help you not only figure out what's going wrong and coach people so that they can become more positive, they can workshop it, they can help you with your communication skills. Not only that, but they can help coach you as a leader so that you can improve the culture, you can build better teams, you can empower the people around you to do amazing work and stay happy with what they're doing. So once I figured out these people existed, I will never again have a startup where they don't play some component. Even when things are good, it's good to have somebody like this that you have on retainer, that you talk with on a monthly basis just to check in on the health of your business, how you're feeling, what you're frustrated with. Being a founder is lonely. You've got to wear all these hats, and there's so much frustration, and there's so much stuff you just have to do that you maybe just really don't enjoy, but you have to do them for the sake of the business. And having somebody like this that you can vent to is so important, because there are things, I'm such an open and transparent person. I would always communicate everything, and somewhere along the way I realized that there are things that happen that I find out about that hurt me a lot. That, whether it's like one person just said something and you heard it secondhand, and you can't tell anyone, because then you're just spreading gossip. You can't tell any of your co-founders, anyone in confidence, and they won't know what you're talking about, nor can you talk to someone outside your business. But that's what these kind of people are for. These psychologists, you go and you talk to them, and these are the people that you can open up with, and you can really tell them, and they know your organization because they work with your organization, they know everybody here, and you can open up to them about all the things that are getting you down, all the things that are frustrating you, all the things that you're just angry about, but you can't tell people because it's just not the right thing to do, because either it's impolite or it's going to demotivate them. That's the worst part, when you realize you've got a piece of information and sharing it with anyone is just going to demotivate them, and it's completely pointless to share it, and you just have to eat it. Having somebody like this that you can consult with, that you have the confidence to say things and talk to in private, can be really, really important to your future success. Whoa, sorry, that was a rant. I've got a couple of these rants. I apologize. This is a long one, I know. Around July 2013 is when we released a couple more courses. We redid the first jQuery course. The problem with the content business is that eventually content goes out of date and you have to go back and redo courses, and that was the first one we had to redo. Next up, we had some Rails 4 patterns, JavaScript road trip. We finally put out an intro to JavaScript course, which, looking back, we should have done a long time before this, because it's amazing how many people need this content. I think in my mind I was thinking, well, Codecademy has intro to JavaScript. Let's not copy what they do. But what we do is so different. We've got screencasts. They didn't have screencasts. They just had coding in the browser. So we should have done it earlier. It was around October 13. Here's what our team looked like. So this is both Code School and the consultancy, NV Labs, all together over at Epcot. And Oliver's in this picture. He's the guy behind the camera. Yeah, so we were growing. Actually, I think there's less people in this picture than in the previous one. So I think it's because of the layoffs. I think we lost a few people. Also, it was around this time, at the beginning of, or really at the end of 2013, that I realized that I needed to empower more people to take responsibility. So a lot of people talk about, the transparency and about no hierarchy. But I probably talked about this in a previous Founders Talk about no hierarchy, but it's kind of a lie. You need some people to be more accountable than others, and this is around that time that I realized this. So I started to put together a directors. So this is what our director team looks like currently. This is not how it started back then, but this is what it looks like now, where we have one person over the marketing team, one person over customer support, one person over art direction. And we started meeting around here around this time, having vision meetings on a weekly basis to really define define Code School's goals and where we're headed and what was our vision and how could we logically move forward. It was around this time that I started to realize that I needed to surround myself with additional people that had experience building businesses, because we were starting to get some really good revenue coming in the door. I mean, maybe 200,000 a month, maybe 300,000 a month, and we were doing pretty darn good. But none of the people in the company, including me, had experience building a business at this size and making good strategic decisions. So I realized I needed to surround myself with more advisors. And so I went out of my way to find some of these people and reach out to some of these people. And I never solidified a board of advisors because of what came next, but I really should have, and I should have done that a lot earlier than I did. In case you're wondering how to start engaging with advisors, number one, it's the people that will, number one, give you free time and not expect anything else, at least at first. But then also you need to figure out some sort of agreement with them if you really want to engage with them on a monthly basis. One model for that, if you Google for fast advisor agreement, you'll find an agreement that lays out how you might engage with them. And basically it has them vesting equity over time based on how much time they give you and how much expertise they give you. So once you've engaged with someone and you think it'd be wise for you to meet with them on a monthly basis, and it'd be wise for them to have some good, have some equity in the company so that they can participate in your future success, that's good too. What's even better than that is if you can get them to invest in your company, because you're motivated as an advisor a lot more if you put some of your own personal money into it, and you will naturally, even subconsciously, help out more if you know you've got something to lose. So see if you can get advisors to do the fast agreement, but if you really can get them to put money down, even if it's only, $1,000, they should do that. Even if it's only, $500, get them to do it. In a perfect world, it's like $10,000, right? So now I've got some interesting numbers. It was the end of 2013. Here's what traffic looked like. We were driving a lot of traffic. It was really good. Really, really good. We had a lot of free courses at this point, as you can see, and these were the kind of traffic that those courses were driving. These are unique visitors. So as you can imagine, some of these people are going to want to save their progress and sign up for Code School accounts, and they get into our mailing list funnel, and some of them are going to click through the links to Code School. So it's done pretty well for us, this free content strategy. Around February 2014, released a couple more courses. Ended up doing another Google-sponsored course, Discover Drive. It was around this time that I realized that we have a pretty unique recipe about how we produce content. It's really combining a bunch of disciplines, from instructional design to graphic design to videography to video animation, domain expertise. All these different skills go into how we produce the videos and the courses with the interactivity, that really I was so surprised still at this point that we didn't have more competitors. The closest thing to a competitor that we have is Treehouse. But even Treehouse is more beginner, and I refuse to look at them as competition because I know lots of people that I have encouraged to get a subscription to both. When you're learning something new, you can't just pick up one book. You're gonna have to go through multiple books to get good at it, and maybe multiple subscriptions to online code schools, right? So we have this unique recipe. Also, here's another interesting stat. If we look at people who started courses over time and how many of them completed the courses. Now these are people who pressed play and then went on to complete the course. So if you look at just January 14th at the end, you know, you can see that, you know, about 22,000 people started, but then, you know, no, other way around, sorry. About 67,000 people started, but then only 22,000 finished. But this isn't a good way to measure engagement. What might be better to measure engagement is this, looking at people who started engaging, they finished level 1, and then they went on to complete the course. So if you do that, people who start engaging, finish level 1, and they keep on playing, it's pretty good, 75% completion rate. Because on, you know, on the previous slide, those could have been people who pressed play, you know, on that free video and then decided they didn't want to learn it and they went away. So we have pretty good engagement. We have a unique recipe, but our business, as we have it right now, doesn't look like it's going to scale quickly anytime soon. I mean, here's what things look like for paid individual accounts and team accounts. It's sort of like going up, 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 up. And, you know, we don't give a lot of discounts to a lot of people. So really, you know, it's monthly subscribers, not a big discount. And this is what we kind of look like, right? There's no hockey stick here, right? That's the hockey stick. People say that they're, you know, looking for a company where they can figure out how to pour the fuel on the fire and then make the company go like this. But we're pretty even here, right? We're going up. So, So we have a couple options from here. I realized this at the beginning of 2014. We can continue to grow a lifestyle business. And, you know, we started in the December of that last year doing profit sharing. And so we could, you know, keep on growing steadily, start doing, you know, bigger and bigger and bigger profit sharing and, you know, make us all a little wealthy within the next 10 years. But that's kind of dangerous. Who knows what's going to happen in the market in 8, 10 years? There might be another downturn. Something might go wrong. You might do something wrong on the website and lose a bunch of customers. That's kind of risky too. There might be another competitor that comes along, raises more money than us, analyzes our recipe and starts doing exactly what we're doing, but doing it better. So that's a risk too if we just keep on growing steadily. Secondly, our option would be to find strategic investors. So maybe find investors that know the space, that know how to scale these types of businesses, that can help advise us and figure out how to spend the money correctly so we can scale the business. But that's kind of scary too. As I mentioned towards the beginning of the talk, any sort of investor is going to want a 10 times return. And if we're going to take investment at this point, so we're doing pretty good, it probably could have been like a $10 million investment. Maybe we take a little bit of money off the table and we sell maybe 20, 30% of the business. It's a big risk because their investors are going to advise us to do what it's going to take to get their money back, which probably means, we started to realize that probably means like doubling our team in the next year. And we were concerned that that would kind of hurt culture, kind of do things to the way we like to create our content that we wouldn't enjoy. Also, it's kind of risky. At that point, you're aiming really high and you're risking because you're going to spend a lot of money. And again, if something happens to the market, something happens to the website, something goes wrong, you lose some really good people on your team, it could be detrimental to the whole business. And now it's even harder to make a profit because you just hired a bunch of people. Oh, yeah, and you're probably spending a lot of money on sales and marketing. So that was an option, right? And the third option would be to find a strategic acquirer, right? Oh, and I didn't mention, of course, finding an investor means having a boss. And to be honest with you, I never had really good experiences, you know, in my career having a boss. So the idea that we were accountable to somebody else in our decisions, that's also a little scary, but that's also scary with number 3. But with strategic acquirer, so what would that look like? So I wasn't about to, you know, I would never think about going to one of those like brokers that, you know, takes your company and advertises that it's for sale. But I thought it would be interesting to take a look at companies out there that would be interested in acquiring us. And I was looking for companies where 1 + 1 = 3. So companies that could add value. Maybe they had access to a whole different audience that we didn't have access to. So we'd be able to get in front of a lot more people. I was also looking for companies that we would have a partly cash deal, so we could take some money off the table, because what we've got here is valuable, and an equity deal. So, part cash, part equity, so that we could participate in the future success of that company. And I was really looking also for companies that could sell our services, right? Because that was always our weakness, still our weakness, that, perhaps we don't value sales and marketing enough. So we could find a company that has the resources to do sales and marketing, to scale it up. We could be part of a bigger organization. That was interesting too. The other thing you got to keep in mind, most startup acquisitions are in the low 10 figures, right? So under 50 million. Why is that? Because once you get above 50 million, the number of companies that could actually have the right amount of cash and give you the equity that you're asking for at that valuation start to go down. When you get above 50 million, when you think about, okay, who are the, number one, it's a lot more rare, but who are the companies that can afford that? Or like companies like Google can afford that, Apple can afford that. In the education space, like Pearson can afford that. They're a big player there. But when you look at those kind of big companies, sometimes when they acquire other companies, they do things that are not good. They force people to move. They, end up sometimes doing some layoffs. They change the culture of the company. Some of the best people end up leaving because they, send in their own executives. It's like, who wants to be a part of a big, slow company, that's not very agile? It's hard to be agile, or maybe has a lot of politics, right? So we realized, like, if we're going to be acquired, that's the other thing we realized, like, if we're going to be acquired at all, whether or not we bring in an investor or not, the odds of it happening, it needs to happen before we break that, $50 million valuation. Needs to happen underneath that if we really want to team up with a company, with a growth company, with a strategic company. So, and even if we got an investor, like if we got the investor, we realized that we were going to be pretty close to getting above that, which means, really what that means is not allowing one of those big companies to acquire us, but instead what that means is the only other option you have there, if you want to get some good liquidity, is to do an IPO. And I've learned a little bit about what it's like to go through an IPO. And I'm not sure that I ever would want to be the person at the helm when a company goes through that. I don't want to be that CEO. So, like, if we went and did that, I'd probably have to find another CEO, and that brings in all sorts of issues. But I wouldn't mind joining a company that is going to go through an IPO and having them do it, and me not having to worry about all the stuff you have to deal with as a CEO when your company does that. Because it's years of preparation, it's years of stuff afterwards. Oh, there's so much stuff that I would never want to deal with. So, moving on. So we realized it would be worth entertaining the idea of a strategic acquirer. We didn't really decide that that was the option, but we realized that would be the first thing we wanted to explore. So first things first, let's figure out our goals for looking for people. And so when we talk with people and we say we're interested in being acquired, we can show them what's important to us. Number one on my list, culture, jobs, keep it in Orlando. So from day one when I talked to people, I told them, this is my number one goal. Because we love what we do here. We're happy with what we do here. We don't want that to change. Number two goal, these people must value our product and have a good strategic fit. So there's got to be something about their business that will allow us to easily scale, get access to a new audience, get access to more people to, teach with us. It could be all sorts of stuff, but it's got to add value. And number three, we're looking, as I mentioned before, both a cash and equity deal so we can participate in the future success of Code School, right? Why wouldn't we want to do that? So I started reaching out, and at the same time started getting our ducks in order. What does that mean? Well, we realized, like, we need to really separate Envy and Code School, because if somebody's going to acquire Code School, they're not going to want to acquire a consultancy. Like, consultancies aren't nearly as scalable and worth as much as this product that we created right here. So I sent out a survey saying, for the people who some would go back and forth between the two companies, I sent out a survey. I said, check A if you want to work for Envy, check B if you want to work for Code School. It's just, survey. And because it was important to me that people go the direction that they want to go, at least for, a year. I said, we'll time box for a year, and if you want to come over, then if we've got room, we'll see what we can do, right? So I was really surprised at who went one way or the other. And I started to realize that I don't like making generalizations, but really there's two kinds of developers. And of course, there's some people that are in the middle. There's some people that go back and forth, but there's two camps. Number one, you've got the camps of developers that are more tools focused. So these are the people that often want to work on a new product or use a new technology every 6 to 8 months. They don't care too much about what the product they're working on. They care about using the best tools and solving difficult problems. Then there's the product developers. The product developers are more motivated by what they work on than the tools that they use. So for example, we've got a ton of developers at Code School that are more motivated by getting to work on a product that improves people's lives and helps educate people. And they're more motivated by that than the tools that they're using. What that means is they have more patience to deal with a big code base and to decipher code and get in the guts, because they get to work on something that means something to them. If you go out and build a product, right, or even do a consultancy, if you go out and you build a product, you want product developers. And if you go out and build a consultancy, you want more tools developers, right? Because if you're building a product, you want people that are intrinsically motivated by what the product does, because they're going to try harder, because they get good positive vibes by the problem that your product solves. So back to the story. I started reaching out to companies, some of which had in the prior couple years expressed interest to me. They said, hey Greg, if you're ever interested in merging the companies or getting acquired, let me know. So I reached out to those people and a couple other people that I thought might be interested. And what's funny is, I talked to some local business people that had more experience than me, that had gone through acquisitions before, and got them to give me advice. And one of them was like, well, refuse to sign any NDA, and you should be able to get one price, and then you leverage that price in the deal, and you can send that to the other guys and say, hey, can you beat this, and try to get them to outbid each other. Reality of it is, if you're doing a strategic acquisition and you're not going to a broker, you can't do that, because when you go to these companies, the first thing they're going to say is, we would love to talk to you more about this, but we really aren't going to unless you sign an NDA. And you kind of don't want to start out the relationship on the wrong foot, so you sign it. You don't really have a choice, because most of them won't even talk to you, because of course they don't want you to shop around. If they give you a term sheet, they don't want you to go and shop it around, so why wouldn't they do that? So that's why I can't tell you who those companies are, right? So there was a couple companies that we were talking to, and we did the whole dating thing. It's really interesting what happens at this point. When they say, yeah, we're really interested, then you start dating. What does that mean? That means their executive team flies to your office, spends a day or two with everyone, taking turns with different people in your company. They learn the ins and outs of your business. They get to know you personally. Then they fly back to where they are, and then you go to them. You send your executive team to their company. They show you how their business works. They introduce you to a bunch of people, and you spend a lot of time getting to know them and how their business works. If you ever get a chance to do something like this and get a deep dive into someone's business, I highly recommend you do it. We learn so much, and it was really surprising too, because some of the executives that we just had so much respect for, that seemed to be so with it, we would go to their companies and get to know their people and end up getting the impression that they didn't value their employees nearly as much as they should. And because of that, their talent pool wasn't as talented as their executive team. And it's a big red flag, right? So it was a really good learning experience. It was also really validating. We realized, oh my gosh, we really have our stuff together here. Our team is so functional, and we've really set up really good, directors, and we've been really working hard on our business to make sure we've got our vision and we're driving forward, and we keep open communication, and we're continuously learning, and so much of what we were doing was spot on, that we would tell people about what we did here and they would take notes. And they would say, oh, we'll have to try that in our business. So it was extremely validating about what we did here and how we've built a great company. Flash forward a little bit, around May, we kept on releasing courses. We did another course with Google that's shaping up with AngularJS. And you know what? If you Google for Angular and you click on the first result, you'll see a page and you'll see a link to our course. Same sort of free content. In the end, we ended up getting about 4 different offers. The last one that we talked to was Pluralsight. I can talk to you about them. But what was awesome about Pluralsight is that the way that they started was pretty similar to ours. They were pretty profitable from the get-go. What this meant is that when they started bringing on investors, because these guys took the investor route, like the 3 choices that I showed you, they took the investor route and they went sort of the enterprise training route. But because they were profitable originally, they were able to get really good investor deals and were able to retain a good amount of control in their company, which was great. They also had a very similar culture. It was clear that they really believed in hiring intelligent people, paying them well, and getting out of the way. Start from the assumption that you are doing things to get in the way of your creative people, and figure out how to get out of the way so that you can let them do what they do best and enjoy the work that they do. All of their executive team were incredibly authentic and genuine people that came across that way. Their audience had very little overlap with ours. They had access to a whole different audience, which is really appealing too, because I was looking for that. They also had a huge sales and marketing team that was trained to sell their product. Oh, how amazing is that? We need to be able to leverage that to get our product out. They also have great investors, as I mentioned. They maintain control, and they were great, and they're building momentum. They had just raised their Series B financing, and all the evidence, when you look at their company, if you looked at it, you would say, oh, maybe they're going to do an IPO someday. That looked interesting too. And like I said, I'd be interested in taking a company through an IPO, but I don't want to be at the helm. And here were these guys that had lots of experience that seemed to be heading in that direction. And we're looking for strategic acquisitions. Their Pluralsight's 2 rules in their culture guide, they just have 2 rules. Be kind, courteous, respectful of those we work with, and always do what's in the company's best interest. Like that's their employee handbook in 2 lines. And there's something really cool about that, because they want to make it clear that they trust their employees and they want to behave that way. And so after all this, you have to ask yourself, do we want to work with these people? Would we feel comfortable having these people kind of as a boss? They made it clear they were never going to treat us that way, but would we want to work for these people? And the answer was totally yes. The way that they just communicate was so authentic. When they have questions, when they see something and they wonder why something is why it is, they approach it from a side of inquisitiveness, right? And they ask the right questions. Really mature guys. So we got to know each other after a while, and we're like, yeah, I think we're really interested, and we'd love for you guys to, if you put out an offer, we'd be interested to entertain it. So they gave us a term sheet, and we decided to take the next step, which is due diligence. Term sheet is this non-binding contract that really doesn't mean anything, aside from the fact that it has some numbers on it that are the numbers for the deal. And if you sign it, it means it goes into 2 months where they look deeply at your books and you attorneys talk and you negotiate. And then maybe in 2-3 months you close on the deal. But during that time, when you sign that term sheet, it means that you can't solicit it and talk to anybody else. It means we're the only person you're going to be talking to about the potential of this for the next 2 months. The other thing they said here going into the deal, which was interesting, which proved to be true, is they said, listen, there's going to be people that tell you the deal we're going to put forward and we're going to show you is too good to be true. That's what people have told us in the past. But we believe, in investing in smart people and putting our best foot forward. So we're going to put it together, and why should that not extend to how we treat an acquisition? Why shouldn't we pay a little more and have more fair terms and not have any golden handcuffs and and put our best foot forward so at the end you feel like you got a good deal. We want you to feel like you got a good deal. That's more important than us winning on anything, because we believe that if you're happy, you're going to bring value to the company and you're going to work hard for us, hopefully, if we can gain your respect, and together we can do amazing things. Why wouldn't we do that here? And it was just something that I'd never heard from anyone, especially like that golden handcuffs part, right? Most deals when it comes to acquisitions, they might say 50 million, but in order to get that whole 50 million, it might only be half up front. The company might only be getting 25 million. In order to get the other 25, they might have to meet some pretty good milestones. They might have to meet this sales milestone after year 1 and they get, 10 million. And then this big year milestone after year 2 and they get another 15. But if they don't even make that milestone in year 1, they're only getting half that amount. Yeah, it's kind of nuts. So, but they said up front, they said we don't believe in golden handcuffs. That's golden handcuffs, right? That's, keeping you at the company because you're going to get a big payout eventually. And if you leave, you don't get it. But they're smart enough to know that that doesn't motivate people. In fact, a lot of times it's the opposite. If you want to motivate creative people, you can't tie it to money. You can't. It actually demotivates people. It's been proven over and over again. So they were smart enough to understand that. So they said, we're not going to have any of these golden handcuffs. So we moved into due diligence, and they told us, our attorney's going to talk to your attorney, and if anything ever sounds fishy, please come and talk to us. Let's talk it out. Let's keep communication open, because, they knew that when you have attorneys involved, man, sometimes things cross the streams, and you're better off just getting them on the phone and saying, this doesn't make sense to me. Why would we do it this way? And whenever we did that, they said, oh, you're right. It doesn't make sense. Right? So it's great. There was lots of work from our attorney, lots of work from our CFO at the time, Bernie Mapilli, and also there was a local mentor of mine that I gave me some advice that I started meeting with. That I said, hey, can I pay you a couple grand and have you sit in on all of these meetings we have with the attorney and Bernie, because I want somebody who has experience selling companies from a business perspective to be by my side. So I paid him to sit there just to make sure that we're doing everything right. And it gave me a lot more confidence that we were doing things right, because this is a big deal. I want to make sure we were dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. So there's an interesting story at this point. We realized, with due diligence, one of the things you got to do is get all your paperwork in order. Anything anybody's ever signed, any contract you ever had with any company, you've got to get it all together and indexed and in folders. And oh my God, it's ridiculous what you've got to put together. Thank God I had Bernie. So one of the things we realized that we didn't have is not everybody had signed Code School's employment contract. And some of them had signed Envy's, but they haven't signed Code School. Some of them didn't do it at all. So we sent it out to a couple people, and some people emailed back saying, dude, I can't sign this. I was like, what? why can't you sign this? And they pointed out, they were like, there's a non-solicitation in here. Basically what that means is, it's saying that they can't go and work for a company that solicits to our same customers. So if they go to another company that teaches computer science online, they can't, if there's some same customers on both platforms, they can get in trouble. Some crazy stuff like that. So some of the even the teachers that work here emailed back and said, yeah, I can't do this. My profession is teaching computer science online. I will always be doing that, and I can't guarantee that the next job that I take isn't going to market to the same customers. So I responded to them the same way I would normally do, which is like, oh, just delete that part. Just delete that part and sign it. That's what I would always do in the past. But I knew that wasn't going to fly with Bernie this time around. So I went to Bernie and I said, yeah, man, this agreement doesn't match our culture. We never really took the time to match it up and show the trust that we do have in our employees. So he said, well, man, if you change it at this point, you're going to have to get it approved by Pluralsight if you change the employment agreement, because it's going to look fishy if all of a sudden, oh, it's a new employment agreement. So you're going to have to get it approved by them. So I worked with the attorney. I got a revised employment agreement that matched our culture. I sent them an email. Said, hey, Pluralsight, we realize that our culture, doesn't match this employment agreement. The employment agreement doesn't match the culture. We had to change it. Here's the revised one from the attorney. Please let us know that you are cool with us having everybody re-sign this agreement. And also, please send over your agreement so we make sure we're not going to have any problems in the future. And I explained why and whatnot. So they agreed to it. We had everybody sign the new agreement, which is great, and matched our culture. But I realized 2 weeks later I'd never received their employment agreement. So I emailed them back and I said, hey, we never received your employment agreement. Just, can you send it over when you get a chance? And they said, hey, Greg, we realized after what you did and talking to you and talking to our team that our employment agreement didn't match our culture either. So we went and back to revise it. That's why you haven't gotten it, because we're in the middle of revising the whole thing. And so it was great. So these guys learn, and they're up for learning, and they realized that they needed to fix theirs too, and they did. They fixed theirs too, which is pretty awesome. So another good sign that we were working with good people. It was around the end of October that we ended up closing the deal. I had a full day of signing documents. Oh my God, that was ridiculous. Just going through and one document after the next and faxing it and sending it. Man, that was crazy. Then we started releasing more courses, and there were some really good days in there, especially getting to dole out a little cash. So it was a cash and an equity deal, and it was really great that I was able to give some cash to some people at the company that for their hard work. And really, since then, nothing has changed. Pluralsight from day one and still to today has been very firm that they see that we have a great team here and they want us to continue running autonomously apart from them. They see that our culture is all about having people here in this office, and we can continue to do our events and want to keep us, a part of their culture too, but then, but also keep our culture. And so we've kept on running business as usual. Very early on in the due diligence phase, Aaron, the CEO, said, hey, I'd like to schedule one-on-ones with you every Monday, just so that we check in every Monday how this process is going. So for an hour, we would sit down every Monday and check in with, it was Aaron, and then very often it was Aaron and Gregg Woodward, their CFO. And to this day, we still do that. We continue that. So every Monday I check in with them. We talk about business priorities. We talk about victories. Also going into the deal, Bernie Mapilli, our CFO, didn't want to continue working for Pluralsight, but that really worked out well too, because the parent company, it's good for the parent company to do all the finances all the same, especially with the direction that it's going. So our financial team is over there, which is also really good. And I'm also encouraging them to get some really deep financial reporting, which we never really had. And I can do that because they've got people dedicated to us. What else has been, it's just been great because nothing has changed except that I'm a lot more relaxed because now I can focus on just creating the best content, the best way to start learning technologies on the internet and not having to worry so much about the future of the company. Now all the stress about future outcome and with the equity and stuff like that, that's all passed on to the guys at Pluralsight who not only are a little bit more seasoned business professionals than I am, but they have some good investors as well. So it all worked out really well. There's two misconceptions though, when people see a number like, Code School acquired for 36 million. Two misconceptions that I want to get out of the way. The first is that it's an all-cash deal, and as I mentioned, it's not. We wanted to make sure, we did want to get some cash out. It was a little more cash than equity. And we wanted to get that out because no one here has a lot of money in the bank. So we wanted to get some cash to de-risk. You do that to de-risk when your company's going good. Who knows when the market's going to crash. You get some money in the bank personally. And we thought it was worth betting on Pluralsight, so we all have equity. And also the second misconception when people see this is that all the money went to the founder. And as I mentioned from the get-go, anybody who was there longer than a year ended up with vested equity. And there was even a point when we were restructuring things, when we were preparing for the acquisition, where I had an opportunity to give people more. So one week I had more than 50%, and the next week I had less, because I was able to go back and give the people who really played a key role and worked hard in the company, I got to give them higher percentages. So I love the fact that I got to do that and give a meaningful payout to the people who worked hard. And I'm even working hard now because I think that you need to have equity in the company that you work for. I'm working hard now to make sure the people who did start as employees less than a year ago, I'm making sure that they get some stock in Pluralsight this year, because I think that's the right way to go, because they should be able to participate in the future success of Pluralsight, and Pluralsight's very open to that. But best of all, we get to continue doing what we love the way we want to do it. So all in all, I think I feel really lucky about how it turned out, and I'm not sure I would have done it any other way. And that's the story of Code School. I know I was a little long-winded. Thank you for tagging along this long. If you haven't seen the other Founders Talks, highly recommend you check those out. If you're a fan of what we do at Code School, hopefully this alleviates the fear that we're going to be changing. We get to keep on doing what we love doing here. And in fact, it's giving me more time to focus on what I enjoy, which is creating the best technical content on the internet. I'm even working on a course. That wouldn't have happened unless this happened, because I was doing whatever I had to do to build the business. And now I can focus more on what I enjoy, less stress with about the future of the company, which has been great. Thanks for watching.